Hi, I'm Carly of Gnarly Carley Gaming, and welcome back Couchside. Today I am talking about a new game headed to crowdfunding. Today I'm talking about Luthier from Paverson Games. Why I'm so excited about Luthier and just Paverson Games in general is largely to do with the thematic worlds that they build within their games. They initially had put out Distilled, which was a game that immediately caught my attention because it has to do with the whiskey making process, gamified. And I love this. I'm a big whiskey girl. It was my second biggest collection after board games before I moved here to the UK. But now they have one that's about instrument crafting. And I like the divergence that they've taken in that. It has to do with the history of instrument making and performance. It also has to do with construction, but it brings players into a really rich thematic world. There's a lot of themes these days that feel very similar, especially cute anthropomorphic animals and natural themes and racing themes. And a lot of these themes to me are very generically lovable, and people like them. They tend to produce beautiful artwork. But they're generic so that they'll appeal to a wide range of people, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're inspired or rich or interesting. And I like that Paverson decides in its games to try to craft something novel, an experience in something that they can bring you into, a world with actual people that create things. And you get to not only interact with those people and are introduced to those characters in the games, but also get to learn through the process. And so one of the reasons I was drawn to Luthier, besides reading the rulebook and thinking it was a game that would make me happy as a gamer, was because of that. I value game creators that bring about more rich worlds and themes and speak more with their platform that they have. Gaming can do so many things, and I like when games softly educate and bring us into something that we might not know about, or maybe that we love. You could be an instrument fiend, whether that's because you're a performer or a crafter of instruments, and be excited by Luthier. But you could also be excited just as someone who's starting to learn about this craft that you may not have given mind for at all before. So now that I've talked about why I was so excited for this game, let's talk about the game itself and how it plays. In Luthier, players play as a family of artisans at the height of classical music in Western Europe. And what they do in the game is, over the course of 6 rounds, try to score the most points, basically be the most notable family of artisans. This is done by crafting instruments, repairing instruments, and creating moving performances, notably, but largely through making your patrons happy. These patrons are the core of the game and kind of push you throughout it, satisfying their desires for the things you craft and the performances you cultivate will largely bring what brings you that notability. And so how does this game play? How do we interact with patrons? How do we make all of these things? What do we do? Well, the game comes in kind of 2 phases, both a planning phase and kind of an execution phase of sorts. In the planning phase, this is a blind bidding worker placement game. There are 5 main actions on the game board, and I'll kind of break down what each of those are later, but essentially each player will have these worker discs with different values on them. And in the planning phase, they'll take their workers, the higher number, the stronger they are, and on their turn place one of them, rotating through till everyone's placed all of their workers. The order they do this in matters, because when these workers are revealed at each location, whoever's the strongest and the earliest, in the case of a tie, will get to do the action at each of those spaces first. And the order that all of these different actions will trigger in is also based on players. So once the planning phase is done, players will take turn in turn order and will get to choose what places will activate. Then you'll reveal each of the tokens present, line them up to see who gets to go first, and players will get to take their actions. And so this is a big part of the game. It offers worker placement, which if you know me, I'm a fiend for. I love deciding on where things go, with also a bit of like bluffing and blind bidding, which is really tense and delightful. One of the first action spaces is the salon, where you can go and get those patron cards that I was talking about. And when you do, whoever is the strongest gets to pick first. So maybe you're eyeing that salon and you're like, I really want that person, but I want to have a strong token over here as well to craft the instrument that they need. So which one do you prioritize, the person or the thing you're going to craft? And what do you think other people will do based on what they're going for? Each player will start the game with a patron, and so you can kind of eye what people might be needing or wanting as the game goes along. And I love that kind of biting social tension. I think a lot of Euro games, I love me a Euro game, can end up not always having the most player interaction. Sometimes you're a little bit siloed in building your own engine. And I love building my own engine. There's plenty of games that don't have player interaction that I love, but I think that's like why we come to the table. And so having an element of this like blind bid is just stinking lovely. And now the actions themselves. So we have the salon where you get patrons. We have the guild where you basically can acquire instruments that you'll then work on. You'll need materials to work on them, but think of them as kind of blueprints of sorts for different instruments that you'll be able to craft. Next up, we will have the repair action, which allows you to spend resources to repair different instrument types. And then we have performance. In performance, there's different cards and you'll choose one of a certain music type that you want to perform. And when you do, you take your worker strength, so the strength really does matter, and then roll these music note dice, and any note shown get added to your total. Based on the totals you roll, you'll get different bonuses for performing that piece to a different level of ability. Lastly, in terms of actions, you have the balcony, which is basically nabbing chances at first to go for next round. Each round, based on anyone in the balcony, turn order will change. And so turn order can actually bounce quite around the board and won't stay consistent throughout the game. So you're bidding for each of these things. You'll start off with 3 workers, but throughout the game, everyone will gain more, both as just rounds progress, but also specialty workers as you advance in different ways. And that's one of the cool parts about your strength in each of these arenas and where you choose to place it. Most areas of the board have a bonus when you play a high value chip there. So you could play a high value chip because you want to beat someone out, but you also might just do it for the ability that it gives you on the board. And the more you push some of these abilities, the further you can specialize and grow. So for instance, if you use high values in performance, and are able to, you can get a bonus to move up this performance skill track. Not only will that give you things like better dice to roll, a black dice instead of a white dice, which has higher value percentages when you're rolling for performance later, but it can also unlock special performance workers, which can boost your values for that skill later. Similarly, there's craft bonuses that can be achieved, and there's a whole reputation track, which can give you big bonuses throughout the game. So this very simple idea of having these workers of different values and blind bidding for where they are becomes really rich in a landscape of trying to satisfy your patrons. And I said that that was the core, but I really haven't talked what that's all about. Because satisfying your patrons is about all those other actions. They want to see you craft specific instruments or repair specific instruments or perform specific pieces. When you do those things, all 3 of those actions, you'll actually take a little marker, depending on what you did, and you'll actually get to put it in the orchestra pit, depending on the action that you made. So for instance, if you repair an instrument, you will take a little repair token and you'll move it into the orchestra pit, matching the type of instrument that you repaired. This will showcase that you've done that already, and then when you look at your patron board and you see that they wanted to have a repair of that specific instrument type, you'll be able to satisfy that patron. Most simple patrons will want to see you craft something, and then others will have secondary wants like repairing or performing another specific kind of piece or instrument. And so you'll mark these things as you go to showcase what you've done and what you've completed. And then when you have done so, you actually tuck the card, whether it's the repair or the performance or anything, under the patron so it's subsumed by them. And you might say, why do I need to tuck the card if the token's marking the board? It means that you can't double up on two things for different patrons and kind of smoke the game in that way, but also everything in collective on the board in that orchestra pit will give you extra points and other bonuses when you place your token, but also is an area control element at the end of the game. What I mean when I say this is all of the tokens will amass, and whoever has a token as a solo token on a space, or the most tokens on a space if there's many people, or first to get there really, is going to be first chair of that section. And at the end of the game, you get a whole swath of points for having abundance of first chairs. So there's different brackets, and depending on how many first chairs you have, you'll get an extra boost at the end. So you do want to watch what other people are doing and try to maybe knock them out of first chairs, or maybe you're like, I don't know which instrument to craft, but no one's made this one yet, so I know I'll get a big bonus for completing it and getting first chair, but also that'll be points at the end of the game. That was a lot of things, but really what it breaks down into is playing workers and having a little bit of that blind bidding fun, executing all these actions, and a big part of them is about the patrons. You'll acquire new patrons and make them happy through the things they want. Now, what if you don't? Well, your patron board has limited spots, so you can't acquire endless patrons. But additionally, at the beginning of each round, each patron has a little track of gifts that they will give you because they're your patron, they're supporting you. And as time ticks on, they'll give you more and more gifts associated with the things listed on the bottom of their card. However, their patience will wear thin, and if you don't satisfy their request in a timely manner and their cube hits the end, you actually lose that patron, and there's a penalty for that. So you want to keep them happy. And this isn't too tough to do. The game is very generous. If you satisfy one requirement of a patron, for example, and they have two, the time kind of snaps back. They're happy, they're content, they're impressed by you for a moment. But really the game is about building up points through doing all of these things. You'll get points when you craft, you'll get points when you repair, you'll get points when you perform, but really doing so mindful of the world around you and who you can impress in the process. It's awesome if you can make a great violin or a cool harp. It's cooler if you impress someone doing it. Now, the only other things I haven't really talked about in the game is the actual crafting of the instruments, and then this action called go to market. And largely because those aren't the actions on the action board, but I'm going to follow up with them now. Basically, you have two sections of your board. You have a roughing section and a finishing section. These are two different benches in a game, even though musically, if you're crafting, you probably just have one bench and would do the same action on the same place. But in these actions, you're basically spending resources to refine and craft these instruments. First, you have to place these instruments. You can place any of the ones you've acquired at the guild at the beginning of each round, and then you'll spend resources to first rough them up and then to finish them, really scoring them in a big way. Now, what this requires is that you place workers on your own personal board. This can't be blocked. People can't stop you from working at home. However, highly skilled workers will do more for you when you place them on your player board. Now, the last thing, which isn't an action when you're placing bids, but is something you can do, is when you're executing actions and things come around to you to decide what's next. Once per round, you can go to market and acquire some resources. Each round this will change. There'll be a new market card that basically informs like the cost of resources. And one of the bonuses you'll get throughout the game for doing actions when you complete things will be money, and that will be poured into more resources to help you craft and repair more things. And so those are really all of the different actions of the game. I think it can be a game that's a little overwhelming at first, just because you have to decide where your different bids should go and you don't have a large sense of the game. There is a written guide that you can use to kind of walk you through a first round and make those choices. But really, I think that's just kind of part of the intrigue of that first play and those moments of, if I only did this, or, ooh, that's how that flows together. There's exploration. It's a bigger game. That's what a lot of big games demand of folks. But I think it's a really excellent one. And like I said, I very much value the world that it steps into. So I'm a music geek. I'm a history geek. It definitely is up my alley, but I really appreciate how much they stepped into this one. I will say it's way less in the nitty-gritty of what it takes to craft. It abstracts that out to basically wood, metal, and animal, such as like horsehair for a bow if you're thinking about crafting these instruments, and getting those resources and putting them towards things. So you're not really getting into the nitty-gritty of like all that it would take to fully craft this, but you get a larger sense of this world and an introduction to these craft people that did exist and are behind a lot of this music history. And so I very much value the step into that space. If you want to learn more about the campaign, I'll include a link to it below. And if you have any questions about the game, gameplay, and my thoughts about it, feel free to leave a comment below and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. But otherwise, I will see you all for the next video. Take care.